Hello and good evening. Welcome to Positively Positive, and I am your hostess, Susan Mintz. I'm all in purple tonight because it's lilacs. To me, it's spring coming, and it's lilacs and purples and lavenders. So just to let you know, I'm all in purple. I just think spring is coming, and lavender is just a marvelous flower, and lilacs were in bloom where I used to live. Anyway, this is Positively Positive, and the reason we named this show this is because no matter who we have on, no matter where we are, no matter where the person lives, it will always be centered around some aspect of HIV and AIDS. And it's all a variety from all over the country, people involved with organizations, people with personal stories, people who felt the call that this was where they needed to be in their community. Marvelous show, doing exceptionally well. It's called Positively Positive, and you can go on Campbell Health Solutions and see the other interviews. You can go on my website, susanmintz.com, SUSANMINTZ.com. There's a page with all the interviews, and you can read about it. But I felt years ago that there had to be a show that people could tell their stories on. They could talk their feelings out. And I encourage writing your story out. But talking and getting it out of your head is so very important, because this is where so much of the trouble breeds. And if you can talk it out, especially in an environment where it's just you and me, people are going to watch the show, but it's just you and me talking. So Positively Positive is just a marvelous, one of a kind, never been done before, groundbreaking. There's not one other show in this country dealing with HIV on a regular basis like this. We are wanting to get national recognition and a sponsor. We want to take this thing as big as God's going to let it go, because HIV has not gone away and people are still getting ill. Medications will help. Obviously, it's wonderful, but you still have to get tested and know your status, or you can't make the right decisions. So I am looking desperately. We want sponsors. We want national. We want big time, because this show is for you and for everybody who's involved with HIV and AIDS. My story is in my book, Committed to Love. Again, on my website, you can read under the books icon about my books. Committed to Love was a very personal book because I documented my husband's illness. Dr. Jeffrey Mintz was the love of my life and my best friend since I was 11 years old. And on my honeymoon, we were young kids. I got pregnant, but on our honeymoon, he told me he thought he was gay. And we yelled through it, cried through it, and 25 years later lived through it. He was bisexual, extremely handsome. You can see all the pictures on my website. Very handsome man. We were a beautiful couple. Nobody would ever have suspected that he had another life, nor that I led a double life. But he was marvelous. The book came because when he got diagnosed with full-blown AIDS-related pneumonia, he was put in the hospital on June 20th, 1992. Then I started writing every day until his passing on August 17th. Every medication, every fever, everything that was going on. And hopefully one day my book will be made into a major series on Netflix or some other channel. But this story is about love. Committed to my marriage, committed to God, and committed to the man I love. And 30 years later, I will still be loving him no matter what happens. He is the one that I'm going with. HIV was given to me. I don't have it. I don't mean it that way. I'm negative because we chose an abstinent relationship in 81. The book will tell you everything you need to know, as well as my website, because I want to be with this guest tonight, who's an amazing person. My other book is called And I Held Her Hands with a Hospice Heart. 24 stories of people I met while I was doing hospice work, volunteering as an 11th hour at a care center in Boca Raton. So both books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Amazon preferred. They're $22.95. And I can promise you that each chapter will bring to life something in your life that you may not need now, but you will need them, because I talk about life. I live life. There's challenges and obstacles, but how you choose to face them. You can't change what's going to happen in your life, but you can make healthy choices begin with you. So go to my website, susanmintz.com, check the books out, check Positively Positive out. And now, For those of you who have been watching regularly, I love to dress up with the gimmick, the gloves, and the jewelry, gaudy jewelry, and the glasses. And when I take the glasses off, and I usually say, "Oh, Susan, you have as much makeup on as you do in the 60s." Yes, there was a show on HSN where one of the guests said, "Well, don't you want to wear less makeup as you get older?" And I screamed at the television, "No, I want to wear more. I want to wear more makeup as I get older." So that's my story with, oh my God, I have a lot of makeup on. My guest tonight is an amazing woman who I've known for many years, but I really don't know her. And I'm sure you have relationships like that. So without further ado, I will say Dr. Sandra Maria Anderson-Spencer, come on into the studio.
Thank you for such a warm welcome, Susan. How are you?
I'm incredible. I'm so glad. I've been so excited to interview you because the thing is that I've known you. Rob first introduced us, Rob Scott, my best friend, and he introduced us. And all day I've been thinking about, I've known this woman for so long, but I don't know her. And I think we have relationships like that with people. You can know someone because you know them, but you don't know them. This show allows me to get to intimately and personally know you in a venue that's not challenging. We don't cut you off. We don't stop. It's just an interview that flows. And I learn about so many great people that I may know or not know. But as much as I know you, I can honestly say, tonight I'm going to know you.
Thank
So
you.
The last time I saw you, not in the meetings, but the first time we met was when Rob Scott introduced us and you came down to my place in Boca and you were interviewing me about my book.
I was.
Remember?
I do remember. I had the pleasure of reading your book from cover to cover and reviewing your book on Amazon. So I wrote a lengthy review because the book was so touching. And you were so authentic and honest in that book. And I tell you, I got to know you through your heartfelt story. I can tell you I cried a little bit.
Good.
Reading your book. So it was beautiful.
I cried a lot.
I can only imagine because you would, like I said, you're very authentic in your writing, Susan. And it blessed my life. So thank you for writing it.
I know my words. I'm reading now some articles I wrote when it was fitness magazines or newspapers. And in between the shows airing, I want to still talk about writing, teach writing classes. So a couple times a week, I'll go on and do something. And I can read an article that I wrote 30 years ago for a magazine or a newspaper. I know my words. I don't have a large vocabulary. I don't write like that. I'm wordy, but I'm very simplistic. And I flow with a person effortlessly. That's what's so wonderful about this show is I don't have to get crazy. We don't have to cut people up. We don't have to. We're going to talk 45 minutes to an hour. And when it's all done, we're going to know each other very well. But you interviewed me, and that's how I remember you interviewing me. And I said, boy, the tables have turned a lot, my darling, haven't they now? You weren't a doctor then. You were in school.
I was finishing up my schooling, yes, going right into my dissertation process.
I want to get now into this with Rob introducing us and you coming down, but I always like to ask the guests, where were you? My issue would be is number one was like, where were you born? And then how did you transition into getting involved with HIV? And then what about scholastically? So I really want you to take over. And as I said, if I need to. So this is what I want to say. Where were you born and how did you transition into where you are now? Take me on that journey.
So I was born in Tampa, Florida, and I just remember growing up, it was just magical, my childhood at that time. And believe it or not, Susan, we grew up in a house that was built on top of an old cemetery. And I know that sounds like, almost, you know, unbelievable, but that was our life. We grew up in Tampa. It was like a dream because my sister Joyce, I was the daughter in the middle. There's five of us, and my sister Joyce was the eldest, and then my brother Leon, my brother Michael, and then myself, and then my baby sister Linda. And so my mother and dad, they were hardworking entrepreneurs in Tampa. They had their own store, and my dad was a barber, and we just had an amazing childhood in the beginning years. And I think
So,
that's when we come to normalize trauma, because it's hard to know that you're going through trauma or dysfunction because you don't know what that is. You just know that
mm-mm.
your parents are your everything, and your family is your world. And so as children, we can't really differentiate, what is a healthy family dynamic versus a toxic and dysfunctional family dynamic.
do
And
you,
so
do you- how many siblings then? How, because your mother must have given birth to a litter. How many siblings?
five.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you have five brothers and sisters?
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes.
You said you're the youngest, you're in the middle.
I'm in the middle. Yes.
Are your parents still alive?
My mother Lily, she is still alive. She's 82. She lives in Fort
Oh,
Lauderdale, and she is strong and young at heart and does everything she did when she was in her 30s. And so, but my father has since um, uh, passed on and is with the Lord.
now you were raised up in a Christian background, I assume.
Yes.
Was it a
Yes.
predominantly African American church and Christian?
Well, that's a great question because we grew up so in Tampa, it was like a melting pot, similar to not the big metropolitan area of New York, but as far as the demographic, it was Spanish, it was African,
Yes,
it was Latino, it was just this
right.
beautiful menagerie of races, and that's why we grew up nearly a colorblind. And I know a lot of times we don't really like that word colorblind because we want to see people for
No,
who they are, but when you're a child you don't really see color, you see human beings, and that
right.
was my background.
Multi demographics,
Yes.
multicultural, and it's wonderful when you're not exposed to the real world and other people. The older you get, that's when the issues start to manifest. I think if you're not exposed with all the stuff, you can be sheltering a child so much that then when they go off to college and they are in the real world and they go out into the world working, that's where the kids get all messed up because they've led a kind of a peapod life.
Well, that was definitely not my
Right.
experience. I
That's
know
wonderful.
we grew up with that sense that there was no racism, there was no um, hatred in that area. However, there was a lot of wounds. My mother expressed that a lot when we were, as we grew up and we moved from Tampa to Fort Lauderdale. And she did express that. She spoke about Emmett Till, and she was
Uh-huh.
12 years old when Emmett Till was killed. And Emmett Till was a young teenager, and she
Hmm.
remembers it well. And she told us the story about this young African American young man that was just visiting family and never came home, and
The
his life was
movement.
destroyed
Yeah.
horrifically by hatred and racism. And so,
There's so much energy. I also think today's the energy people put out being angry. I don't have that energy anymore. I just, it's easier to smile and be nice. I don't have to wait. But I think that's a sad commentary. Is that, did you see the movie Till? Did you see all that? They did several different ones.
I didn't see that, and I think it's because I just work so much. I have multiple jobs that I work, and I absolutely love the work that I do. But I do know the story about Till. I have watched documentaries
Yeah,
about
wonderful.
Till, And I tell you, it's a heart wrenching story of the reality
Our
of
life with
America,
today.
and the
Hmm.
sick
And it's
societal belief that a man can be somehow less human because of the color of his or her skin.
no,
So that is a
it's
sick
terrible.
societal belief, but it's also systemic, and it's very much,
It's toxic.
yes, it is toxic,
It's
but
corruptive. And it gets into.
it's deliberate, is what I'm saying.
Oh, of course, but
Very
it's
deliberate.
insidious and yet it's deliberate.
Yes.
Insidious, it creeps in slowly, but then all of a sudden it's there.
Hmm.
And society is very much wanting all that negative. To our society, I think today, because I'm a little older than you are, I know when I was brought up, we didn't have this. We respected teachers, we respected police, we had accountability. Over the last, I'd say 20 years, I think is where I've noticed the change. The last 20 years, where we have just been degrading each other instead of looking how much better we are with each other. It's become something I don't even want to talk about at this point. I want to know about you. How did you get involved then with HIV? And when did you move to Palm Beach or where you live? I want to know about your background, your education. I want to know that.
Yeah, so I got involved with HIV, because in my life I did not know about the services and the advocacy surrounding HIV. I worked in nursing for many years. I worked at St. John's Hospital in Fort Lauderdale. And, I used to hold the hands of those who were dying of AIDS, because during those early years, you had maybe 3 to 4, 5 weeks before your immune system was so ravaged by the virus. And back in those days, we had AZT. And I remember holding the
Mhm.
hand of a young man. And I'll just tell you this one story of a young man that was passing. And whether it was HIV, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or cancer, it didn't matter. In nursing, we see the patient, we see the human soul and the human being, and we just want to love and provide that unconditional love and care to our patients. And that's what I did. And so I didn't even see the stigma at that time. And so, fast forward many years later, when I began to get sick, and I would go to the hospital. And
Give me a favor. Give me some years. You were a nurse first. Is that your
I was
first
a, I was a CNA, I was a certified nursing assistant.
Or so you were CNA. And where was this hospital?
It's on Fort Lauderdale on Oakland Park. It's still there today.
What's it called?
St. John's
Oh, all
Hospital.
right.
Hmm.
I mean, I change things around when I'm writing the story, but this gives me the framework for writing this up.
Yes.
So,
Some
where did you get your CNA from?
I got my CNA from Coral Ridge School of Nursing, and my instructor name was Macy Mays. She was an amazing, beautiful Jamaican woman who taught me such a strong work and study ethic. And I think that's where I started to get my love even more so for studies, other than my sister Joyce, because my sister Joyce was a stickler with education. But when I met Miss Macy, oh my gosh, she just turned it up. She turned the heat all the way up, and she
So you,
required of all her students to give her exactly what she expected. So no matter where you came from, when you got in her classroom, you were going to give her that, or you wasn't going to last. And so,
you were a CNA first, and then where did you go next from that?
yeah, so I was a CNA first, and then when I found out that I was HIV positive. And as a matter of fact, I was not diagnosed with HIV. I was diagnosed with AIDS, because by the time I was tested, it was advanced. So I had a CD4 of like 2. And
What year was this? What year was this?
this was in 1992.
Same year as Jeffrey.
Mhm.
Yeah, and you were ill. You had the pneumonia. You had pneumonia, or what?
No, I
How did
had
you?
Kaposi sarcoma.
All right.
And so it's very dark skin disease. And I had the swollen lymph nodes. I had chronic fatigue. I had the inflammation. There was so many other what we call opportunistic infections
Right.
that I
So,
was dealing with. But here's the thing, Susan. When I went to get tested, to go to the hospital, they wouldn't test me for HIV because I didn't meet the criteria. So back in those early years, they were looking for gay white male. And that
right.
was a terrible mistake
Yep.
because not only did they misrepresent the virus,
The look.
they
Hmm.
misrepresented a whole population of people. And
I
though
bet.
the numbers were highest among um, men or same gender loving men and men who have sex with men, it was not relegated to just that demographic. It was so much. It was a human. It's a human um, infection from Arthur Ashe to Ryan White to
Yeah.
Liberace and on and on. So back in those days, they wasn't looking for me, and
No.
so I
And
went to the doctor 3 times, and 3 times they had an opportunity to test me, and they didn't. And it wasn't until I went to the dermatologist because they just said we don't know what's wrong. They sent me to a woman, and I'm so happy that they sent me to this beautiful woman at dermatologist specialist, and that was in the city of Plantation, Florida. And she took one look at me. They biopsied me in the back of my neck, and I still have that scar today. And she said, we don't know what's happening, but this is definitely Kaposi sarcoma. And we need you to
hmm.
go to see an infectious disease doctor. And Dr. Alberto Mestri, which is one of the most
Yeah.
phenomenal doctors in the world to me, was
Yeah.
the one that brought me from that place of having a CD4 of 2 to where I am, which is undetectable, very healthy, and
Wonderful.
very grateful.
So this wonderful dermatologist biopsied one of the lesions.
On the back, yes, she did it on the back of my neck because it would
And
leave a
did you
scar, and she
did you
didn't want the scar in a visible place. So she did
did,
it on the back of my neck,
did you have lesions in other parts of your body?
all over, all over.
And you did you suspect that? Did you know who gave it to you? Did you have any idea? Where were you?
Well, no, I didn't. And, you know, that conversation is a conversation that I love to lean into. And let me tell you why. Because it doesn't matter at this point. When we go into that conversation, it further drives stigma. And not just stigma, but it drives us away from the resolution. And the resolution now is not identifying the origin or the source of the infection, but it's now in garnering all the strength that you need to be able to come out of the um,
Yeah.
the horrible stigma that has attached itself to this
That's-
diagnosis to fight for your life. And I remember talking to my doctor Alberto Mestri, and not once did he ask me that question. You know why? Because at that point it didn't matter. You know why? Because I was in the last stages. And when you're in the last stages and think you may not see your children grow up, which thank God I have because all my children are grown and now I have amazing grandchildren, then the thought of where it came from becomes irrelevant other than making sure everybody that you know gets tested and making sure that you
Okay.
are um, reporting and you're identifying that as far as with the data and surveillance and things of that nature. And
It-
it's not a crime, and I think that is what keeps people
Awful.
um, out of the testing rooms. You
It's
know
so
what I mean?
it's so backwards right now. Again, we need what I want to see is this act up on steroids. See people
Oh,
coming out. That's why I want this show to go national, or I want the visibility that I can have because I want to see the real faces of HIV. They're Black women,
yes.
Hispanic women, Black
And
women,
act
African.
up. You said it. That group was so
I mean,
radical.
in the
They were
90s,
they
people
were
were
the
crazy.
pioneers of the
They need
movement.
this. We need this now. We need
Yes.
activists, not just LGBTQ and pride. No, we need everyday people to get up and say, we're going to do something to make a difference. This is wrong, what's going on. You shouldn't be looked at like this. It's a sexually transmitted disease, but it's okay to get syphilis, but it's not okay to get HIV. We have stigmatized this so much that
Yes.
it's backwards.
And
And
back to
now
what we
in
were
the
talking about, the
30,
criminality, Susan, that needs to end as well.
oh, terrible.
Listen, there I can spend hours on this topic, but I'll just finish by saying this. When we want to chase the ghost of who infected who and who did what to who, you cannot chase your health and wellness. It takes
No.
too much energy. You're going to do one or the other. And then
And
if you're holding on to the grief and animosity and the hate
no,
and the fear and all this other energies, giving it to there as opposed to moving forward with your life, saying that I'm going to fight for my health and wellness. I'm going to do what I need to do. And yes, I am going to report and find out, okay, what's the origin, but not so much to ruminate there or get fixated on, who infected who, but just to say you need to get tested and we need to make sure that you're not going to continue to transmit this virus. And by the way, when you're on your antiretroviral medication, you cannot transmit HIV. You can, however, transmit other sexually transmitted
yeah,
infections. So we
yeah.
need to be safe, and we need to practice abstinence where we need to practice that, but we also need to practice safe sex practices.
And
Okay.
that's what you,
And we'll
you
get
know
more
my
into that.
story. I mean, but you know my story was that in 1981 I heard about AIDS, and Jeffrey had given me every other STD. But when I heard about AIDS, I knew there was a difference, and I approached him at the door and I said, "An abstinent, I'm not leaving you. I won't divorce you. I adore you. I love you. If you want to leave me, that's fine." But we stayed married. But abstinence saved my life. And when he was diagnosed, first thing the doctors were saying was, "You're going to get tested. You're going to, how are you?" I said, "I'm fine." I didn't even wear any gloves. I never wore gloves or masks. I didn't do any of it. I knew I wasn't going to get it. There was no bodily secretion going in my body other than kissing and hugging and touching and crying.
Right.
People are so stupid. And a day and an age when you have so many resources right in front of you. Look at this. We're just talking to each other. I'm in Boca. You're way up in Palm Beach. And we're talking to each other about this. Where is the national discourse? You know how important this show could be nationally? To know every week at a certain time, we're going to have a guest on or an organization or somebody involved, and we're going to get this thing back up on steroids. I want ACT UP bigger than it's. I mean, my vision for this is get rid of all the stuff and the people that are bothering you. And let's go forward with a positive attitude because we have the resources. We have the availability to keep you healthy. It's not the 90s anymore, but
Mhm.
we're thinking still like this, many people.
Because we
I
get
talk,
stuck. We get
I
stuck
talk
there. Mhm.
about this all the time when it went from the homosexual community, the gay community. I said it's going to spread into the heterosexual community. It's going to go into the minorities, the underserved. I was telling people all of this. Nobody wanted to believe me. I'm telling you still. You don't have good insurance. You don't have a good doctor. You may not even have the internet. You got your kid. There's reasons why people today are still contracting it at a time when they shouldn't be many times.
Absolutely. And for us
Education,
to continue
resources.
to
I feel
be
so badly. I feel
practicing.
badly for women who can't get the get the kind of care they deserve, especially women of color. It's an underserved market. So tell me, from their CNA, you went and got a bachelor's somewhere from in nursing. So what did you get the bachelor's in to get you
So
to be a doctor?
that didn't happen for many years because I was suffering from domestic violence, PTSD. And we have to go back a little bit because before I even started my nursing, I went through human trafficking at the age of 11 years old. And
You
so
were
when you're going through that level of trauma and you're not getting the trauma informed care that you need, then what's going to happen is this snowball effect where you will re-victimize because now the brain is so traumatized and you're now moving with a frequency that brings that into your life. It's almost attracting that into your
it's a
life.
drain.
And
It's
that's exactly what happens. There's an old saying that like attracts like. And unfortunately, when we are not resolving the trauma and the grief from our past, and we all have
Mhm.
a level of trauma, whether it was a divorce, whether it was domestic violence, whether it was rejection, whether it's that secret touch when we were little, that incest, that molestation. These things don't go away because we repress it. It doesn't. It
Oh,
stays and it
terrible.
becomes cumulative. No more than if you had a cancer diagnosis, will it go away? It will spread. It will metastasize. Same thing with HIV. Ignore it. It will multiply. The virus will multiply. Why do we ignore these things? Let me tell you why, Susan. Many of us are in survival mode. And if
Yeah.
I'm in survival mode, if I'm just trying to make my ends meet, paying the bills, trying to keep food on the table, I'm trying to handle stress, and I'm not even taking care of myself because I'm taking care of everyone else around me. Stress
Right.
is cumulative. And what happens in survival mode, who has time to take time off of work to go get tested? Right. And so we'll wait until it's absolutely
Right.
detrimental to our health, and
The
we are
11th.
now on our backs. We're so sick, and now it's impacting our ability to take care of our families. Now we go in. And by this time,
Yeah.
like it was with me, we have a late stage diagnosis, and it should not be that way. Not with
No.
cancer, not with breast cancer, not with HIV, not with mental health. We need to go at the first sign so we can get the help we need. But the problem is we internalize the
Oh, of
stigma.
course.
We
And
internalize it, and that in internalizing HIV related stigma and mental health related stigma, that becomes a
the
big
other thing is, though, I look at this as like an 11th hour with women, especially. I mean, men, you can't force them to go to a doctor, and I don't even care at this point. I don't talk to them. But a woman will take care of the kids, take care of the home. Women will do all of it, and they think of themselves last. Too late with something like this. You don't. You have to self love and self care. Self care is so important because if you, as it says in the Bible, being sort of, how can I feed you if I can't feed myself? How can I heal you if I can't heal my? How can I do you? That's one of the reasons with Jeffrey. I was able for those over those 2 years to take care of him through 3 bouts of pneumonia and his passing in my house, in our house, in our bed, because I never had one sick day. I didn't have time to get sick. I had to sleep. I had to eat. I still had to do me, exercise, and it's very important because it's like the 11th hour. Don't wait for the 11th hour to get get your test. But then you were a human trafficked at 11.
And that's the thing. And my story now is it's on an amazing documentary that we finished a few years ago called Taking Innocence Project. And now it's on Prime Video and Amazon. And it's also, my story is also in my book called Lessons from the Thorns. His Grace is Sufficient. And so writing this book really set me free because no one wants to sit and say, I went through trafficking. I went through that type of trauma, and that's hard enough to say. And a
How
lot of
did
these things I said I was going to take to my grave.
But how did you even, how did that happen?
It happens when you have a family dynamic where there's toxicity, there's dysfunction. My parents divorced when we left Tampa and came to Fort Lauderdale, and that divorce led to my mother remarrying, and that remarrying led to a stepfather, and that led to incest. And so, unfortunately,
Wow.
runaways are the number one target of
Right.
human trafficking. And according to statistics, 1 out of 3 runaways will be taken
Get
into
picked
human
up.
trafficking.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they for kids on the street, they're running away. And the next thing you know, somebody comes along and says, I can do this for you, or I can help you. And next thing you know, you're in the back of a van going somewhere. Yeah. So when you were 11, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. See, I didn't know you. I knew you, but I don't know you. I'm learning today. Tonight, I'm knowing you. So you were that. How did you get out of that?
Pardon me?
How did you get out of that where you weren't human trafficked
Well,
anymore?
so I was picked up by the police, and I thank God the police intervened. But unfortunately, back in those days, again, when you are a woman of color, a girl of color, you're not going to get the same quality of care and treatment. There was no Amber Alerts going
What,
up for me.
what year
And
was that, though? What year were you 11? How old are you? Because you were 11.
so I was born in 1967, so that kind of gives you an idea. But I need to say this because when you're picked up from a trafficking situation and you're put in place in DCF custody, DCF is the Department of Children and Families. Oftentimes they're not equipped to
Equipped.
handle that level of trauma in
No.
anyone. And that's why even today, runaways, even in DCF custody and state custody, are just as high as runaways from dysfunctional families.
Right.
So
And I think the
I
I
need to
think the
say that.
runaways are worse. I think runaways are worse today also because of the fact that the parents are so divorced, they're so dysfunctional. The parents are on their own drugs, and the kids are also with the internet and everything else that they're doing. At least if my family was screwed up, at least they were screwed up in the 50s or 60s when they didn't have all this. I mean, we actually had to call each other and talk or go out and play. What's going on today, I see it, I know it, I see it. And it's too bad because I can't save the world. I'm sticking to HIV and AIDS, but it's a horrible environment for so many young people.
But
And the
I think it still existed back at that time. We have many stories, lived experiences of women and men who have survived human trafficking even before my time, because I work in the area. I work across the nation with different organizations in human trafficking, and we'll be in Jamaica in May speaking on my human trafficking
right.
experience and the intersectionality between culture and human trafficking, and what does culture how does what role does culture play in human trafficking. You will be surprised to know.
Yeah. And what our boys, and we only think about it being girls, little boys are being that sex trafficked and sex slaves
Absolutely.
too. And
Absolutely.
I mean, Russia's big into it. A lot of the countries, they're huge, and Atlanta's a big hub for it. I mean, I watch a lot of documentaries on that because I find that subject so just appalling.
Yes, and we think it's
But
just
I
Amsterdam. We think it's just Venezuela. We think it's just
no,
Indonesia. It's right here
it's
in
Atlanta.
America as
It's
well, all over
Atlanta
the
and
world.
Chicago and Portland and LA where you see homelessness, where you see all of this problem. You're seeing the mental health. You're seeing it's so easy for a guy to come up or a woman to come up and say, "Here, you come with me, and we'll get you all taken care of." Yeah. So, how long were you being trafficked?
I was trafficked from
How much?
age of 11 till almost 30. The time I was picked up by the police, I was put in DCF custody. And by that time, I was 12, going on 13. And I was put into a place called Littman Shelter, which is a part of DCF. It's a part of
Mm,
their protocol when they're picking up young people off the street. And Littman Shelter is a shelter home for kids from 12 years old to 18 years old. So we age out at 18. But I just made the age limit. So I was taken from juvenile and put into Littman Shelter in Fort Lauderdale.
So you come a awful long way, even to get a CNA and get through all this, and then you've got a bachelor's in something.
And then I actually remarried. And when I remarried my husband, I married my husband, Spencer, in 2006. We met in 2005. And, at this time in my life before I met him, I was determined not to marry. I was determined to live alone, just to work, to travel. And I was just happy being alone, because when you go through that level of trauma
Hmm.
and then re-victimization with domestic violence, and it's the same type of trauma, the same type of dehumanizing treatment, you are self-isolating.
Hmm.
Isolation was soothing for me. Being around
Right.
people was not. And
No.
so I had a people phobia. And unfortunately, when you go through any level of trauma, you will pick up different phobias. You'll pick up different,
Mm.
we call them disorders, but it's just how the brain is trying to make meaning of
Yeah.
what you've gone through. And
That's what I
so,
was going to say. That's what I wanted to mention is our mind is still like, I think, a Star Trek. It's vast frontier. They still don't understand the brain. They figured out hearts better and kidneys and livers, but we have an amazing ability as humans to compartmentalize trauma. We can put
Amazing.
things wherever we want in our head. We can put it over
Amazing.
here. We can put it here. We have an amazing ability with our minds to only remember
Indeed,
the
we were
good.
made in the image of
Or
God. And being
it's
made in
so
the image of God, we
yeah,
know that
yeah,
there's treasures that we don't even unlock until we're put in certain positions. And I
right.
talk about that in my book. I talk about when I was in Edward's house, and Edward was a man that I was sold to, a Caucasian man. And I talk about how my mind would unlock treasures. We call it in therapy and psychology, we call it dissociation, right?
Right.
And I called it my escape, because then you learn the brain opens up these passageways and you escape, and you're not there. It's magical. And again, I talk about this in my book because it's hard to articulate this to help people understand this level of trauma, and unless
Yeah.
you've been there, those who've been there understand. And we bring in this beautiful golden thread of a kinship between survivors of that type of trauma, and we just connect on a very deep level. But it's hard to explain dissociation to someone who has never really
It's
been through that level of trauma. But it is a saving grace. That's what I call it. It was my saving grace.
But your Christian background also has helped you tremendously all these years. You've had a faith-based background. You're a faith-based woman. I mean, when I talk to you, I get calm. I don't need a Xanax. I mean, you're one of the few people who actually can
Thank
rebuke me. I said to this before. I said, I don't take criticism well at all. I've always been outspoken and I don't care what you think and you don't matter in my life. I mean, I had to live in that survival mode because I was always so confrontational and looked different or acted differently. But that's where I was coming from is when I met you. I get calm. You told me to sit up differently in the interviews. I got a laptop so I'd be better. And he said, and I said, she's one of the few people in my life I actually listen to, like you and love. But I know because you're coming out of your heart. People give an opinion, they don't mean they're just yipping. But when it comes out of this woman, a person, a man who's got the heart of God, the heart of love, the heart of it, and who's also been through hell and back with an attitude that says, I'm going to make it one way or another because my God is with me. That's a whole different universe you're living in.
Yes, I would
You know,
have made it.
my feet are on the ground, but my head's way up in the clouds
Yes,
and the
ma'am.
real clouds. Tell me though, so you went into nurse after all this you've been through domestic violence. Where did that fit in? I got so many things to ask.
Well, yeah. So when I ran away from DCF custody, and of course, again, until we heal these traumas, we're vibrating on a frequency that we don't even know that we're vibrating. We're more than a body. We're more than our mind, our body. We are spirit. We have a
Mm-hmm,
soul, and until we can understand the
mm-hmm,
complexity of us, we are triune. We're triune beings. And so until we heal and resolve our trauma and our grief, then we will attract more of the same into our life without understanding the quantum realm, right? There's a
right,
metaphysical realm that we don't understand, down to the molecular structure of who we are as human beings. And so I needed to heal that, because until I healed that, you will continue, until we heal that, you will continue to attract people in your life that will
right.
hurt you, because hurt people
Did-
will often hurt people. And until you
Oh,
heal yourself,
yeah,
then you disrupt that pattern of trauma and toxicity and abuse, and you can start to live your life on your terms, on freer terms, on healthy terms. But we don't even know what that feels like, because when you've had a lifetime of trauma, then calm feels alien to you, right?
right.
Normal don't feel normal to you, because
No,
what's normal after all? What
no.
is normal? You see? So coming to a place where you can be humble enough and teachable enough to get mental health therapy, to truly lean into counseling, it makes everything, it,
I,
it changes everything. It makes everything new. I promise you. If you're teachable, like my therapist said, you're
yeah.
fixable.
If I ever do decide to go to a therapist, I'm definitely going to Dr. Sandra Maria Anderson. doctor, because Jeffrey, you would have loved my husband. You would have been, everybody loved him, men and women. I mean, he was every mother's son and every father's child. I mean, he would have loved him. You speak like he did, but you're smart. Jeffrey, you have words that you use that I know you're smart. Okay. My vocabulary is extremely limited, but I get my point across. The words you use tonight, even in this you're very smart. And you have a very large vocabulary of words I never even think of using. So this guest is very, very smart and beautiful. So wait, we got all the trauma down. I know this is going to go on for a while. This is sorry. We could do you in 2-3 parts. So we got the run away from home. Then we got the sex trafficking, the domestic violence with the parents. I'll embellish all that in the story. But then from a CNA, you get a bachelor's. You figure nursing is your thing. Where'd you get your bachelor's in?
I didn't. When I did after my CNA, I received my associate. So that happened after I started going to Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale. That was my church for years, and that's where I met my husband. That's where I met my husband Spencer, and that was
And
in
where?
2005, Calvary Chapel, Fort Lauderdale. And I remember when I met him, and the Lord just worked things out that we came together, and just fell in love. And then I told him my love of education, and he supported me from day one because I love learning. I loved education. I've always loved it. And unfortunately, that was taken from me because of all my childhood trauma. But because of his love and his support, I received my first degree, my associate's, which is in healthcare administration, then my bachelor's, and I received my bachelor's, and again in healthcare because I love healthcare, and what my and with a minor in counseling, and then I received my master's, and I received that in organizational leadership, and then finally my doctorate in community care and counseling, marriage and family therapy.
See, that was Jeffrey's whole thing. He was reality therapy with William Glasser. But Jeffrey, had he lived, he'd have been the one you'd see on CNN. I mean, this is a long time ago. He was so brilliant in that respect and such a good therapist. But it was marriage and family, drug and alcohol. And from the time he graduated in Gainesville, and that was from 71 to 74, got this opportunity to work at a residential treatment center for emotionally disturbed youth in Houston. But that was his career. But I tell you, had he lived, 5 more years is all he really needed because he was so good. But he got into the business end of it, which was great. The corporate stuff with the military, and then he got involved with the HR in different places, or in Louisiana at the oil refineries doing what you do. I mean, he was so good at what he did that people wanted him back and back and back. 5 more years is all he needed, and it would have been a gold mine, literally, because he sounds just like you. There's the difference. You have a way of approaching your life now from all you've been through. You now are a totally different being than you ever thought you could. I mean, you live with HIV. You told your husband, I'm sure when you were going out with him, you told him you were HIV positive.
The Lord says you have to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So no longer being conformed to this world, the scripture says in Romans, but being transformed by the renewing of our minds. Science is catching up with scripture because we didn't know about neuroplasticity at that time. Those scriptures was written over 2,000 years ago, but neuroplasticity underscores this, that the brain can rewire, it can reorganize itself and become brand new. And that's exactly what has happened. And yes, to the question, Susan, when I met my husband in 2005, and we met in church, and when I found out that he wanted to have a relationship with me, he said he was in love with me and he wanted to pursue a relationship, I did tell him about my life. I needed to inform him, and then I needed to know about his, because it's a two-way street. I needed to know his status and everything else about him. So he was willing to get tested with me, and he went to get tested, and I was right there in the room with him. He already knew my status, and then I found out he's undetectable. He is still undetectable. My children are undetectable. And this is how we end the HIV epidemic, by getting tested. And if
Hmm.
we are positive, understanding that this is not the end of your life. A, you will live a long, healthy life as long as you're taking care of yourself. And in
But
our
it's
family, we eat right for our blood type. Susan, I taught you that some time ago when I met you. Eating right for your blood type. I'm a blood type O. He's a blood type A. So I have implemented that science in my life. We exercise. We trust God as the head of our life. Christ is the head of our life. And this is the recipe for success, and not just success for ourselves, because you don't live your life for
no
yourself, Susan. You
people
don't, and
around
I
you.
know that for a fact. You
No,
live your life for others, because we're a community. Human beings, as human beings, we're made for community
we
and to
are.
love and take care of each other.
Uh-huh.
That's why when I
And we,
see one homeless person, Susan, it breaks my heart.
yep.
We are our brothers and sisters keeper.
Yeah, and it's getting worse because it's become a me society, and that's so the opposite of where we should be. We should be a you society, and not me. The self gratification. That's where you'll get my temper when I start seeing people who have every reason to celebrate life, to give, to do, and they're so mm,
And that's why divorce is so high, over well over 50%. And
yes,
according to the Gottmans, and they have the authority on marriage and family, the Gottmans, and they have a love lab. And they said 90% of divorces happen in our country and around the world because of unresolved grief and trauma from
definitely,
childhood. And
yeah,
believe it or not, my husband and I did divorce. We married and we divorced. The love of my life, I we divorced because I had unresolved trauma. He had unresolved trauma. We have to resolve our trauma and not take it out on the other, right? We have to look in that mirror and fix that. And we need to seek therapy. And when I did, I healed. He's healing, and we came back together and we remarried. And the rest the
is
rest
right
is
now. The
just
rest is right now.
is
But
right
tell me,
now.
where did you get your doctorate? I mean, in what? What you mentioned that you got your master's and your doctorate, and what was it?
I received my master's at Palm Beach Atlantic University, Selfish, and I received my doctorate from Liberty University, the Eagles. So I'm very grateful.
But what was your major that you got your master's in? You said it was before. Was it marriage and family? That's
My master's is in organizational leadership, and my
it.
doctorate is in community care and counseling, marriage and family therapy.
All right. But so I say marriage and family to keep it simple. Marriage
Mhm.
and family, and your doctor's in the same thing.
Yeah, my doctorate is in counseling therapy.
So you're a full-time counseling, honey.
Well, I
You
work
are
for the
it.
Florida Department of Health as the Minority AIDS Coordinator. So I'm there helping to establish programs within the community to help people understand that it starts right here. This is our sex organ,
Of
okay?
course.
Our sex organ is not between our legs,
It's
the
all
biggest
here.
one. It's
We're
there,
visual.
but it's not the biggest one. This is our biggest sex organ. This is where we birth everything from our fetishes to our proclivities to our desires. It's all right here. And until we heal this, then we won't understand what drives us.
Yeah. I
And
think the eyes, though, I think the eyes are as important. We're visual people. And when we see something we like, we want it. Now, if it's sex, drugs, rock and roll, but we see it, or the food on a plate, we want it if it looks good. Our eyes are very important because the eyes send signals to the brain. So when they
well,
work with each other.
you're preaching, Susan, because scripture says this is everything: the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of life. And that in those three things lies every crime, every violence, every trafficking, every rape, everything, the lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, and the pride of
Mhm,
life. And
mhm.
so we need to be transformed again, because when we're transformed by the renewing of our mind, we
We
see
become,
differently.
of
We don't
course,
see with the same lens
no.
anymore.
And every couple of years, you got to get your eyes checked because they change too. So that's a big part of it. Your eyes will see something in 1 year, 5 years later, it may not look the same. So you have to be transformed regularly, like
It's
a
an
car.
ongoing process,
It life is
neuroplasticity or the
life is
reorganization of the brain is ongoing.
life is an ongoing
Ongoing.
process. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
much older than you. I mean, I'm going to be 78 in May, and I know one thing: I'm still learning about me. I'm
Yes, and you're teachable, Susan, and that's what makes it so awesome. When I called you the time, because I watch your shows, I love your shows. I'm learning a lot. But when I saw the way it was, the camera was down and this was in the back, and now look, I see that beautiful picture. I see you in the full frame. When we're teachable, everything is fixable. Everything from our
that's
relationship with our children, with our marriage, with our family. The biggest wounds we have is in those early developmental stages of our childhood. But when we're teachable, like Dr. Paul Heckstrom says, that was my therapist. He's with the Lord now, but he said if we're teachable, it's fixable. And
yeah.
that's the
We're just
truth.
little potter. We're clay. We're meant to be molded and sculpted into things, but you have to want to
Yes.
have that potter's wheel first. You can't sculpt something if you don't have the tools, and it's very hard.
Amen, Susan. And it's
Thank
a
you.
gift. It's a
Oh, of
gift to
course.
be teachable. It's a gift to
Yeah.
be able to
Moldable.
move your pride and your ego out of the way and say, you know
Rob,
what? I'm going to sit
you have
before
to
you.
tell Rob how wonderful this was. When you call him tomorrow, it's your homework assignment, Doc. Call Rob
Yes.
tomorrow and say, "Oh, Rob, this was so good. She just drilled it out of me. She got everything she wanted." But I do. So you are in your own practice. You work for the Florida Department of Health. So,
Yes, and I have my own private practice that I operate on Saturdays with my amazing husband Spencer, and that's called Love Gardens. And we're open for grants, we're open for teaching, and we have clients all over the nation right now that we work
so
with, especially human trafficking survivors.
you're in a private. You heard the music. So
Yes.
oh, we are playing games now, Richardo. Stop it. All right. So you imagine on national TV the fun we could. I mean, this is true. This is real here. If we can do it here like this, all remotely, why can't a national thing pick us up and say we need this
Amen.
conversation? Well, listen. So you got contacts. So you're in a private practice. What do you do with the Florida Department of Health? What's your capacity? What do you do there?
So there I create programs. One of the programs I've created there, it's called ROAR. It's Raising Ongoing Adherence and Resilience. It is a psychoeducational program because we see a strong correlation between those who are emotional intelligence, and that's our foundation of ROAR. We teach those five components of emotional intelligence, including self-awareness. We can't do much without being self-aware. We need to be self-aware because not until we're self-aware can
And
we
we
do the
should.
second thing, which is self-regulate. And then the last three is having that internal or intrinsic motivation, empathy, and social skills. And that's what we teach. And
Well,
there's a
you
strong correlation between those who have a high EQ.
incredible.
They are able to better make choices sexually to reduce their probability or the likelihood of them transmitting HIV or acquiring HIV.
Do
And
you know
so
every
that's the
the
key.
the teachers were always wondering why I was a C student or a D and barely wanted. I hated school. I didn't want to study. I didn't want to do homework. I wanted to be on the streets and learn. And it was interesting because I tested as like 120 IQ to 135 on several tests. And Jeff
Mhm.
would always use me as a guinea pig for his stuff before he present to an oil company. He'd give me all these tests, and I would come up in these ranges that were. I was a good B student to me. I was a bridge between an A and a C. That's what I think, like the show or you. We're just bridges bringing one thing to another, to another, to another. And that's all we are is connector of the dots. The show connects dots. We have
Yes,
to get this in. So you got your dot, but will you send me those 5 things? Would you mail me those 5 things that are
I
part of
will.
that program?
I will. Yes.
I'd love, please do that and call Rob. We have to get this in because it's June. We got to get our good stuff in because it's June. All right. It's long June. June. The month of June is a big month, right?
It is a big month because it is in the month of June that we have our awareness days, including long term HIV survivor awareness. I'm celebrating 30 years HIV positive and healthy, and grateful because of the amazing doctors and the advocates that teach us how to stay adherent, how to have optimal adherence. So I'm so grateful for that. And then
So
we are
it's,
also having, we have a few other awareness days that's
yes, we
happening.
do. We have Long-Term Survivors Day. We have HIV Awareness Day. We have
Yes.
National HIV Testing Day on the
Testing.
27th.
Yes.
And then we have something with the Caribbean days. I don't know if it's the month or a day, but it's National something Caribbean Day. Then that's Pride Month. Pride Month. And I don't like the media because when they do this, they once in a while, they don't even care anymore about AIDS Day or anything. But they do the Pride. They look for the queeniest queen out there, somebody who's absolutely a buffoon in the way they look. And that's what the media will focus on, not all the regular people. They look for the, and they're feeding, and that, you know what? We are fueling that though. There's only so much activity you can do in the streets before people are still going to look at it a little differently. So we
But you
also
know what? I think,
have
if
to
I
get
can
our
just be an
together.
advocate for that, I think no
We,
matter what, like you were saying earlier, Susan, which I love what you said, and I'll paraphrase that. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but
mhm,
also criticism is in the eye of the beholder. And so you could
mhm,
see the most beautiful sunrise, but if it's in you to criticize, whether it's somebody dressed up on on a day that they're marching
yeah,
for HIV, or one of the testing days, they will find something to
mhm,
criticize. So
definitely.
it's really subjective, and I think the best thing we can do is see the beauty, see the human, see the sacredness in every human life. And I think if we do that, we can create a better world.
But that's not everybody, sweetheart. You're coming out of a whole different realm of everything. The majority of people you meet today are stupid. I say this all the time. If I look back at the people I met in my life, 99.9% of the people I met were stupid. Now, maybe it was my perception, or maybe I'm just higher evolved because of everything I've been through, and I don't have the patience for stupid.
Well,
But
I'm kind
most
of
people I
guilty
met,
for being stupid and very ignorant and very selfish and self centered at a time in my life. I'm very guilty of that as well. So I try to give people room to grow
there you
because
go.
God's
Yeah,
grace gave me room to grow. So I give
right,
people room to grow because I'm no longer that. Because again, when we increase awareness, then we can
right.
choose. We can choose a higher level, a higher order of thinking and existing. We just got to cross that bridge of our existence from this
See,
selfish and self centeredness to
now,
one where we see everyone's humanity.
if
And
somebody listened, now here's the exact example. I said when I look back at my life, 99.9% of the people I met were stupid. Out of a whole wonderful interview, somebody will take out that one little snippet and misconstrue the whole thing I'm trying to talk
yes,
about is
I totally
get your
understand.
act together, love more, care more,
Amen.
give more, do more, and it will all come back to you. Get it out of here. Write. I'm always talking about writing. Write your stuff out of here. This is another place. It's like a trash compactor. Your brain to me is a large trash compactor. You can put the good stuff in, you can put the bad stuff in. Get it out of here. And writing to me is my saving grace. I mean, it saved my
Mhm.
life. And that's why I teach it and talk about it so important. And to another author, such as yourself, you know how important it was for you to write your books.
Oh, so important.
And what's the
You're
name of your
able,
book again? And where can we get your books?
you can get my book on Amazon, and you can also get it on my website at sandramariaanderson.com. And also we have services that we provide on that website. So again, it's available at sandramariaanderson.com, and I can sign a copy for you and send it to you.
And you're going to help me with an audible.
Absolutely. And the book is on Audible, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So, my very brilliant husband, Spencer, was able to AI my voice by taking a 5 minute snippet of my voice,
And AI,
reading, just reading a script. And from that 5 minutes, read my entire
yeah.
570 page book.
Yeah,
And so five
I,
minutes of your voice, Susan, that's all we
yeah.
need. 5 minutes. And we
And
can
the
read
thing
the
is
rest of
that
your book.
I really don't want, if I had a kidney issue or a liver, I really don't want a robot operating on me. But there's something to be said for robotics and AI and all this stuff where we're going. It
It's
is,
gonna sound just like you. It sounds just
yeah,
like me. It is, and it
of
is
course,
me. It is my voice
yeah,
that they
I want to
took
do
and just
this because
read
that
the rest of the
story's
book.
got to get out more, whether it's through a show, whether it's through God have me on the street, whatever God wants, I'm good with. But I want to, before we do, I just want to say your information is love gardens, mi at gmail.
Yes,
Dot,
that is my Gmail. But if you just go to my website, you don't have to
all right.
remember the Gmail because it's on the website. Everything is on my website at sandramariaanderson.com.
That's wonderful. So we are going to get together though. I just, this is amazing. I mean, I got 4 pages on you that I never knew. I know you now. See how you can know somebody? Whatever we talked for. We've been recording for an hour and 5 minutes. I took up the first five with my thing. But there, we've been talking for an hour and he hasn't, other than a little music interrupted. So I want to just say, Sandra, doctor, if I ever need mental health, and I think I've needed mental health since I was born, but if I need that, I'm going to you. Rob loves you. He thinks you're walking
Well,
on
Rob
water.
is
You're,
phenomenal. You know how we feel about Rob.
I know. You're walking,
He's an
you're
amazing
walking on
person.
water in his book. And I want to say thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anderson Spencer, Maria Anderson Spencer,
Thank you
for
for
being
having
such
me.
an incredible guest
Thank
on
you.
the show. Please tell your friends. Tell people you don't even like. Tell people you
I
hate.
love everybody. I'm sorry. I just do.
Me too.
Thank
I
you
don't
for
have to
having
have you in
me.
my right. I really do. I'm so, and I will say though that being a member of my church, Jesus People Proclaim, because I'm Jewish, but I'm a Messianic Jew. But it really did change my world when I accepted Yeshua. So not to get
Amen.
spiritual, because I'll start crying. But when you have a faith-based background, whether you use it for a few decades or not, when you come from that place that you know God is taking you on your journey, you
Yes,
change.
you do. And like you said, Yeshua HaMashiach, he is everything. By
Yeah.
his grace, I'm here. It's only by his grace. And Susan, before we wrap up, I want to tell you how beautiful you look. I want to tell you how amazing you are. I followed you for years now, a couple of years now since I've met you. And it's just been such a pleasure getting to know you as well. There's no one like Susan
It's
Mintz.
just another
No one.
Monday night in Boca Raton, honey. I'm sitting in my little cubicle saying, Dr. Anderson, come on into the studio. And an hour goes by and I'll be writing you up one day. But I just have loved spending this time with you. And we're going to do more of this. I want us to get together personally more.
Yes, ma'am. It's been
Because
my
I know
pleasure.
when I was really with you before, you were working on your doctorate and you had other things going on, so you weren't as regimented. Kind of, you are on a good schedule that works for you, home, work, everything, family. I mean, and you've also come through a lot in your life, so I give you a lot of. I told you you're just very special to me. I'm so glad you like the outfit because that's the gimmick. If you don't think that this Jewish
Beautiful.
woman has it together, honey. Everybody needed a gimmick.
It's you. It's all
It
you.
is.
And I love it. Don't ever change. I love you just the way you are. And it's just beautiful. And you know what? I tune in, not just between you and me. I tune in not just to hear the wonderful commentary, but to see what you're wearing because I
Oh,
love
that's
to
what other
see what
people
you're
have said. I
wearing.
look like Phyllis